This is the homeostasis section for the control of body water content. As with all homeostatic mechanisms, a constant level must be maintained, as we've looked at with glucose and temperature. We're now looking at the role of the kidney in controlling body water content. The kidney, as its basic external structure, has 3 vessels connected to it, as opposed to just a normal artery and a vein. So the blood carries in through the renal artery and out through the renal vein. Renal artery, renal vein. Renal meaning kidney. But also there is a 3rd tube called the ureter, and this is where the products of the kidney and its functions would be lost out, and that connects, as you can see, to the bladder, where the urine would be taken for storage. So in order to carry out this removal of the water, a process of filtration needs to take place. And this happens in tiny blood vessels and tiny little tubules, all contained inside this kidney, and obviously we have 2 of these in a normal situation. If we now look at an outline of the kidney structure for the internal parts, if we take a section through the middle, we can see there are 3 main layers. The outer layer being the cortex, these pyramids, as they're sometimes referred to, being the medulla, and the central white region is the pelvis, not to be confused with the pelvis of your skeleton and your hips. The pelvis is a collection of all the tiny tubules called nephrons, which we can see one drawn here. There'll be millions of these all the way around the edge of the kidney. And all these collect together in the pelvis and ultimately channel into the ureter, which, as we saw earlier, will connect onto the bladder. Looking at these tiny tubules in more detail, again, this is just an outline that you need to know, there's nothing more than that. One of these tubules has a little capsule at the top, into which the dirty, so-called dirty blood from the artery would be transported. Under high pressure, there's a filtration process that takes place, and it's different to just the normal filter funnel where it just trickles through. This is forced through with high pressure, and it's very fine in terms of its filtering grade, so very, very small molecules can be sorted out. So this ultrafiltration process, as it is called, allows for certain sized molecules to pass through into the tubule. Water is a very small molecule, glucose, etc. These are larger molecules and shouldn't be found in there, but they will still pass through at this stage. The filtrate passes through this big loop of the tubule, and then the leftover waste is ultimately removed here at the collecting duct. Throughout its journey, certain important components that the body needs to retain are reabsorbed. So the water that we need to hold on to, the glucose that we need to retain for respiration, certain salts, minerals, ions, will all be reabsorbed back out of this tubule into the blood as part of this process. So here we have ultrafiltration taking place through and into the tubule. We then have specialist reabsorption taking place, known as selective reabsorption. The waste material left over goes off to form urine in this collecting duct, which is what's going to ultimately end up as the ureter. So this is the process in the 3 stages. There's the ultrafiltration, where lots of water and other products of digestion are squeezed out under pressure. This is from the artery into this tubule. Then there is selective reabsorption back from the tubule into the blood vessel so the body can retain it, such as glucose and certain ions and some water. And then any waste products, the leftover water, so it's excess water, excess ions, that key term being excess there, and the urea, which is being removed by the kidneys, all exits the kidney via the collecting duct from the tubules. But it's excess water, not all the water being either retained nor excreted from the body. So again, like any of the other homeostatic mechanisms, we can look at how the control of water content is carried out using hormones, and rather than like the insulin and glucagon were responsible for the control of blood sugar, blood water is controlled by the hormone ADH, antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone. And diuretic is something that makes you produce lots of urine. So if this is an antidiuretic hormone, it stops you producing lots of urine. So it's sometimes referred to as the stop you pee hormone. And that's the way to remember what it does. It reduces the amount of urine you produce. So urine production is reduced by ADH. So in the same way we had a flow diagram before, this could be a very similar sort of idea. Normal water levels must be resumed at all times. So if the water gets too high in the blood, it's detected in the pituitary gland in the brain. So this is your, going back to your nervous system, the central nervous system doing the detecting and bringing about the right response. So the pituitary gland detects the increase in blood water content. The ADH, the hormone from the pituitary gland, is stopped. So less ADH is released into the blood. That travels, the ADH that would be travelling in the blood comes from the brain down to the kidneys, and the action of ADH on the kidney is therefore reduced. So therefore less water is reabsorbed by the kidney, meaning that more water is passed out through the kidney. The end result is you get large volumes of dilute urine. So the urea that has been removed by the kidneys as a waste product is diluted a lot more in a larger volume of water. That's why the urine ends up being dilute and clearer in colour. Therefore, the urine is excreted in large volumes. The end result is that normal water levels are resumed. Conversely, perhaps due to lots of exercise and sweating, body water content goes too low. Again, detected by the pituitary gland in the brain, increases the release of ADH into the bloodstream from the pituitary gland, travels in the bloodstream down to the kidney, causing the kidney to reabsorb more water back into the blood. The result being that small quantities of urine are produced because the same urea that had to be removed is now dissolved in a small quantity of water, so it's very concentrated urine, a very bright yellow colour, and the result is that more water retained in the body can mean that the water content returns back to normal once more. We now need to consider what happens if kidneys fail to function properly, and in patients that don't have proper kidney function, they'll end up quite often receiving kidney dialysis. And dialysis is a process whereby all the functions of the kidney, in terms of the filtering and the selective reabsorption, are carried out by a machine. So regularly, a couple of times a week maybe, a patient will go into a dialysis clinic and they will have a tap put into one of their arteries. The blood then flows out of the patient and it's pumped to maintain an even pressure and to try and remove any bubbles or anything that may have got in as a part of the process of attaching the taps. As it travels through the tubes, various anti-clotting agents are put in, but the last thing that you want to happen is for this clot of blood flowing through to get clot in it and end up back into the person's body, whereby clot's floating around and could get lodged in a narrow vessel like the brain, causing a stroke. So blood thinners to keep it nice and watery, anti-clotting agents are all added, and then it can enter the dialysis machine. And just like your kidneys, the blood is transported through tiny vessels, comparable to your arteries, and there are various membranes through which the selective filtering can take place, the ultrafiltration. And the waste molecules are put into the dialysis fluid that's flowing through the chamber. There is diffusion from the vessels out into the dialysis fluid, and the waste fluid is carried away. And because the blood is continually pumping round, there's a high concentration of molecules inside these vessels, and the dialysis fluid is continually flowing past these, so maintaining a low concentration in those. And therefore there's a nice concentration gradient set up from in the blood to outside in the dialysis fluid. Therefore it's a constant reabsorption and filtering process takes place. The clean blood is then taken back round and it goes through a series of bubble traps to make sure again there's no air bubbles in there that could end up back into the patient themselves, which would be fairly catastrophic. So this filtering process is fairly straightforward in all intents and purposes, but you need to be able to use your knowledge of osmosis and diffusion to explain exactly what is going on inside of this. And this is the second diagram that's in your notes. As we mentioned, there's a continual flow of blood, in this case going from right to left, through the vessels. Outside is the filtration fluid, dialysis fluid. And this, as you can see, is flowing in the opposite direction. So therefore we have a counter-current system. Counter-current flow. So that goes in one direction, this goes in the other direction, that way. And because they're flowing in opposite directions, that therefore means that there is always going to be a high concentration of things that need to be removed inside the blood and a low concentration outside. So it always maintains a nice steep concentration gradient. Going out. Sorts of things that will be removed, as we mentioned in the kidney section of this video, are the water will be removed, excess salts and ions, and then some of that will be put back in depending on how the body's composition is standing at that moment in time. Always trying to maintain an even homeostatic set of conditions for the patient. So that's kidney dialysis. Often kidney patients undergo transplants, and they have to have a transplant if their kidneys has no chance of recovering. They're often on a waiting list for this and having dialysis in the meantime. So a kidney transplant, as its name would suggest, is from an organ donor. It could be a living donor, where a family relative donates their own kidney to a sibling in desperate need because their life expectancy is in danger as a result. But more commonly, they would wait for the death of another patient or any human being that would then end up on the transplant register as an organ donor. There are advantages of each, and clearly for a kidney transplant, the huge benefits are that there is no need to have any more dialysis. There's a really good success rate these days, and once you've had your donation, you're able to live a normal, healthy life for some time to come. However, the big drawbacks is that there's a massive shortage of donors. You have to wait quite a long time to get a kidney transplant. The kidney itself must be transplanted within about 12 hours. So if the donor has to travel a long way to get to their recipient, that can be a wasted kidney. Like any transplant, there's a huge risk of rejection, being that it's not your own body tissue. Your body will try and mount an immune response against it and fight it. If you do reject the organ, it can quite kill you quite easily. So therefore, to prevent that, patients are given anti-rejection drugs, but they must take these for the rest of their life. That can make you quite weak in your immune system and therefore very prone to further infections, which one of those might be the cause of your death ultimately as well. And like any major operation, a transplant is a huge operation, and that itself carries a huge number of risks in terms of just being on the operating table itself. If we compare that to dialysis, the benefits of dialysis are that it is readily available and there's no risk of rejection. So you just you sign into a clinic and you go along regularly. However, the problems is that sessions have to be regular, and they take a long time to sit in the clinic for. Some sessions might be 10 hours long, which is quite an inconvenience on someone's life. They must also make sure they're very, very strict with their diet, because the dialysis machine is not as good and efficient as a real kidney would be, and so therefore they have to make sure they avoid excess salts and proteins, everything that the kidney would be working hard to remove. You don't want to put extra strain on the dialysis machine and run the risk of it not doing its job properly. So lots of benefits and problems to be associated with each technique if somebody had kidney failure. Another function of the kidney, as well as water control, is to remove waste products such as urea, which we've already mentioned. So we should just give a small bit of consideration to where urea actually comes from. We should hopefully recall from digestion that proteins are made up of amino acids, and therefore they're digested into those amino acids again. And that's through the process of digestion. Some of those amino acids will be used to build tissues within our bodies, so creating new proteins, reassorting the amino acids and building up and replacing our own body tissues. Those that can't be used, these excess amino acids, must be got rid of. They cannot be stored in the body. And so therefore, as a result, they must be broken down. And this is called by a process called deamination. This is a complex process of a series of different steps, but the end result being urea is the waste product. And this is a toxic waste product, and therefore the body must remove it. So that from there it travels in the blood to the kidney, which will filter it back out again by the processes that we've just looked at of ultrafiltration. All the urea that is produced needs to be removed, regardless of how much water is lost. And therefore, as we saw, we need to consider how the concentration of the urine that is produced by the mixing of urea and the water changes as a result of your body water content. As we saw, low body water content meant concentrated urine, high body water content meant large volumes of dilute urine. And that's just dissolving this urea into different concentrations accordingly. This deamination process takes place in the liver. The liver also has a number of other functions as well, and some of the other key functions might be to break down and detoxify the blood. So by that we mean that any poisons, medication, drugs, alcohol, whatever it may be, all in the blood, travel to the liver from the intestines, where they're taken in, travel to the liver, and therefore blood alcohol or medication, in general poisons, are removed. They are all toxins. Hence they are detoxifying the blood from